Jainism everyone, welcome to this evening's lesson. Today we're joined by Dr Mukulbhai Shah, who is the son of Dr Ajit Pai and who has been taking us through these Jain classes since the beginning. Today's topic is the stillness within behind the ever-changing waves of life. So it's quite a broad subject, and there's a lot to talk about. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Mukulbhai.
Pranam. Jai Jinendra, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm just going to, so this is a topic, one of 12 reflections within the Jain tradition, and this is on the impermanence, what's impermanent and what's permanent. And we can talk about it as well, but to start off, there'll be 3 different stories. In advance, if I say anything wrong or against Jin Shasan in advance, I seek everybody's Michami Dugdam, and I'll try my best, okay? Just going to share my slides first. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. So, anitya bhavana, anitya, impermanent. Almost nothing, there is one thing, but almost nothing in this world, Jainism says, is permanent. Whether that's our youth, our wealth, even other people's feelings and thoughts about us are subject to change. I'm going to start with a story, and then we can talk a bit about this. And I'll sort of have a few stories that sort of interrupt things. So there was once a beggar who, for many, many months, never had a proper meal. Then one day, in a forest, he met someone who gave him the biggest meal he had had for a long time. And he was satisfied and he fell asleep. As he fell asleep, he had a dream. In this dream, he dreamt that he was a king. He had all the wealth, people were fanning him. He had a palace, he had riches. But suddenly, something woke him up from this dream. The rain started, and he looked, and he had the same torn clothes, and he was in the same state as he was before he fell asleep. Our human life is said to be like a dream. It may be 50, 60, 70, maybe maximum 100 years. But in the vastness of space and time, Apro Manushya Bhav, or human life, is but a tiny, tiny part. And just like every dream, when the soul leaves the body, no part of the dream can be touched or felt. And just like a bird on a tree needs to find a new tree, in the same way, the soul, once its body is gone, finds a new cage. That can be a golden cage or a not so nice cage, but it's still a cage for the bird of the soul in a new body. So that's the first story. I'm going to stop sharing for a sec. Does anyone have any questions on that so far? I'll explain it a bit more. Okay, so I'll carry on for now. So everything that we think lasts forever, if we really, really analyze it, it doesn't last forever. And that on its own can bring us into a state of depression if we take it in the wrong way. If we take it in the right way, it can give us a sense of peace and a sense of inner calmness through all situations that nothing else, no position, no money, no power in the world can give us, an inner assuredness that our faith can give us if we truly understand this. There's a second story about another king which further illustrates this point. I'll share that story as well. Ye din bhi chale jayenga. This too shall pass. A king was once attacked by an enemy kingdom. He had to flee from his kingdom, leaving behind his wealth, his family, his ministers, everything that he had. He got to a forest, and all he had was a small piece of food with him. But even that was snatched from him by a bird. He felt so down, so dejected. I had everything, and now I have nothing. And in this moment, when he was so down, so depressed, he felt like ending it all and ending his life. But at that moment, he felt that he had a Madaryu એટલે medallion, that a wise man, a sage, had given him when he was much younger. And he said, whenever you're in trouble, look at the message inside that medallion, I Madaryuma. So he looked at this medallion before he took any step. Ye din bhi chale jayenga. This too shall pass. He read this and he thought, today I have nothing, but every situation is subject to change. And so, maybe this day too shall pass. Ye din bhi chale jayenga. He didn't get so depressed. Dukma ekdam din na thai gyo. He didn't get so down that he lost all hope. Over time, he went to his friend, who was also a king, and built up an army, and over years managed to get his kingdom back. He got his kingdom back. And his minister found out that he was king again, and from wherever he was, managed to come back. Pacho avigyo. He was surprised. He said, Raja, e divas taipase kai natu. But you took every nam pacho Raja banigyo sutyu. And the king explained to him that, look, I was so down, I was so depressed, but I had this medallion. And the wise man said, have a look at it when you're so down, so depressed, or when things aren't going right. And it will give you a message that will help you in that situation. And reading that, I realized that this situation today is transient, and it too shall pass. And so I didn't get so down and so depressed. I regained my hope and my courage, and that courage led me to take all different actions that got me back to this position. So the king, years went by, everything was going really well, and he forgot about his subjects, his duties. He started getting into bad habits. Minister Kidu Raja, Pachumaneko, Kebinam Temne Avutu. And the king said, I've already explained to you, ne Pachu Samjaibu. The minister, Mantri Kidhu, he said, have a look at that medallion again, Pachu Jo. Even today, it's telling you something. And he read it again. Ye din bhi chale jayenge. This too shall pass. And he thought about it. And he thought, today, people listen to me. I have respect. I have the power to do good and bad in my hands. But even this day will pass. And he understood that he couldn't forget who he was, what his duties were. Because even this day of happiness will pass. And if he doesn't make good use of it with good deeds, then only he will be sorry in the end. Dukma din na tajo, and sukma lin na tajo. Don't get so overjoyed in happy moments that you forget who you are, where you come from, and what your really aims are on this life. And don't get so sad and depressed in bad times that you lose your hope. So that's the second story. So it's a very sukma linna tajo, dukma dinna tajo. So in life it's a roller coaster with ups and downs, just like the share market, just like governments, just like everything in life goes through phases. For some it can be negative, for others it can be positive. But the essence of Jain philosophy is to maintain a balance within that. The sea of life keeps changing, but beyond all those changes, from childhood to youth to old age, my youth will last forever, but really it won't last forever. My mind, I feel I'm really clever, but as I age, just as the body decays, so does the mind. Someone who has learnt so much, maybe at the end, we heard at the beginning, Jivata samaro, marata samaro, samaro so sanghat. Maybe in the last moments, one has learned all of this, but maybe they only remember Nokar mantra at the end. Who is to say who will get dementia, who will not get dementia? Who is to say that intelligence, power, wealth, all of this, is it transient or is it permanent? And if none of this is permanent, what is permanent? And that thing that is permanent is the stillness behind all the changes. And if you put your trust and your faith in something that always changes, then you will never truly be stable. But if you put your faith and your trust in something that is changelessness behind all the changes, then that thing won't deceive you, won't betray you, whereas any other thing may deceive you or betray you at some point. And you can apply this to anything that you look at. What is transient and what is permanent? And that's the question of today's talk. Sunrise is birth, and sunset is death. Even Alexander the Great, Sikandar, in Jain tradition, Alexander the Great is known as Sikandar, and Bharat Chakravarti. Alexander the Great, there's a Sajai, an ancient Jain um, poem that we sing during Pratikaman and other things. There's one on Sikandar that describes that when he'd conquered all of these kingdoms, in Greek mythology, you hear about Alexander the Great. He asked people that when my body is on the deathbed, please show my hands facing upwards to show that although I engage in all these wars, I did all of this, but I'm going empty-handed. He asked doctors to carry his procession. That I had all these doctors under my retinue, but none of them could save me at that moment. Bharat Chakravarti, Emperor of 6 continents. Today, we have in America, we have someone who's president of America through various means, but time is more powerful than any person in this world. If you read about Krishna and Krishna and Sajai, even time caught up with him. There's a whole passage in the Jain Mahabharata about the last moments in Krishna when he had so much power as Vasudev, emperor of 3 continents. But even Krishna, Vasudev couldn't save his parents from the fire that engulfed Dwarka.
Sorry, Mukul, just quickly,
Mm.
I've just had a message that to say that your slides aren't showing, but I can see them.
Oh, okay.
Can anyone else put their hand up if they can't see Mukul's slides, please? I think everyone else can. Maybe, yeah. Okay. We've got one thumbs up to say. I'm assuming you can see the slides.
Change it now. There should be a green kind of a drop.
Yeah, no, we can see it. Okay. Okay, that's fine. If you just unshare your screen and reshare it just in
Yeah,
case.
sure. One sec. How do I do this now? Stop share
Yep.
and share again. Yeah,
Okay. So
is
I
that
can
right?
see them, so we'll just Sarita, if you let me know if you can't see them still. Carry on for now, Mukul.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. So a child cries when a sandcastle breaks, but the parent understands that it lasts as long as the tide. In the same way, once the understanding of the Jain philosophy comes in, then things that may have made us upset have less power to make us upset. And things that may have made us cry, made us sad, made us dislike someone, what we call rag and dvesh, as the understanding of these 12 reflections of bhavanas increases, the the fickleness of the mind decreases. And that's the power of the Jain philosophy or tradition. Um, so another angle on this, there's there's a city where they draw lots to become king. All of these stories about kings, they draw lots to be king, and whoever draws the lot is king for 5 years, Panchvarash. But the condition is, at the end of those 5 years, they have to go to a desert island that's dangerous with wild animals, Janwar, um, Jungle. And at the end of those 5 years, they don't want to go, but a boatman takes them and they're dragged away. Every 5 years, a new king comes, and they all face the same fate. And nobody wants to become king for this reason. One time, a person gladly became king, and when his 5 years were up, he happily went to this faraway island. The boatman asked him, "My family have taken people to this desert island for generations, and nobody wants to go there because of how dangerous it is, just like this picture shows. How come you are so happy to go there?" He said, "Listen, I knew that I had all the power for 5 years. I would be king. Panch Varash mate. So I diverted the wealth of this kingdom to this island. And now, as you take me in the boat, I'm not afraid, because it's no longer a dangerous island. It's a lovely place. And I'm not scared of going there. The people there will welcome me as a king." 5 years, or let's say even 4 years. We have Char Divas, Chare Divasna Chandarana Par Juthi Maya Shamate Jenave Sangate Eni Maya Shamate. बालपण, युवानी, घर बालपण, युवानी, middle age, don't know the Gujarati word for that, and gharpan, old age. 4 phases of life, 4 days, in this case 5 years. We have a limited human life in which from lifetimes and lifetimes of punya, apre a manusya bhav mailucha, this human life that we've got with 5 senses, with a house, we're not in poverty, we have a mind, we have even a chance to understand higher truths of life. All of this is a result of lifetimes and lifetimes of punya, or good deeds. And it's literally as much as becoming a king. That's how rare it is to get this human life, even rarer than that, especially with all the 5 faculties and senses. And it's a limited period of time in the vastness of what we've been through, according to Jainism. And literally, at the end of this, most people will spend those 5 years or 4 years of the human life in sort of or 4 days or whatever you call it. But a few people like that king will make preparations and will understand that anything that this world gives you is transient. And when people exchange punya, for a lot of people make donations with elok maro naam joye, mari takti joye, ke maro aa joye. But that's almost exchanging punya for very, very small fruits. Whereas um whereas not doing that exchange in this life and doing good deeds not for any reward in this life, but for the sake of it, brings, even though one would not ask for it, brings much, much greater spiritual benefits in the longer run. That is the true value of this human life, or of this Manushya Bhav. Now, bhavna taken on their own can lead to depression if they're not properly understood. So it's important that alongside the negative, you put the positive. And the positive is our soul, or our Atma. That everything else is impermanent, but the soul is permanent. The deeds that the soul engages in, good or bad, will come with the soul to the next life. The subconscious mind, the vibrations, if one builds up more and more krodh, man, maya, lobh, rag, dvesh, that will follow. Some people have an angry nature, an angry tendency. Ene krodh have, kai pan thai ne ene krodh jave. Other people have a tendency to lie. Other people have a tendency to possess things. Other people have a tendency to gossip, or to go for positions of power for the sake of it. all of these, Jainism says, isn't just random. કે આપણા જે સ્વભાવ છે એ ઘણા ભાવનું આપણે સાથે લઈ આવીએ છીએ. પણ આ મનુષ્ય ભાવ એક ભાવ છે કે ખરાબ સંસ્કાર આપણે તોડી શકીએ અને સારા સંસ્કાર બાંધી શકીએ. Or we can break bad vibrations and create good ones that then last for many, 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 many lifetimes. And the mind is the greatest gift for this. So that's that's the third story. Now I have one more story, but before that, I think what time is it? It's been about maybe 25 minutes. So why don't we open it up for a few questions first? For maybe 10 minutes. Koine kahi puchu chamate, and then I can share the last story and we can open it up for some more questions, just in case there's anything so far. Koine kai hoito. Let me stop sharing for a moment the slides. Yeah. So either put your hand up and Mira can select, or if anyone wants to ask anything from what's happened so far, or comment. Even if you want to say something.
So everyone, you can directly put something in the chat for Mukul or the co-hosts. If you don't want to ask Mukul directly. I do have a comment from Ajit, and I think it's Ajit Pai. He says, "Thank you, Mukul, for reminding us of the impermanence of all that is material and the permanence of the soul." If anyone's got their questions, you can also raise your hand if you'd like, and then we can unmute yourself.
There's a comment in the chat. Let me see if I can find it. Hustle? How do we stop the mind from wandering? Is that right? Yes. Okay. So the mind wanders a lot. We know that. Manadu kimahina baja. It keeps running. It's faster than the wind. One way the mind runs because of a lack of understanding. So for example, a lack of understanding of impermanence, as an example. If you give a modern an example that say tomorrow I lose my job, yeah. Just give an example from a work perspective. Different people will have a very different reaction to that. And I think the deeper the understanding of the philosophy, but in an applied sense, not maybe not just dry learning for the sake of learning, but um, my feeling is if that knowledge is learned with a sincere heart, um, not to be knowledgeable, but to be able to apply that knowledge, then that slowly seeps into the subconscious. And every time we hear these kind of things, it it filters into our subconscious mind. And yes, we've got hundreds of lives of sanskar of responding to in a reactionary manner, whether that's to growth, man, maya, lob, rag, dvesh, anger, greed, pride, ego, deceit, likes, dislikes, all of these things. So that in this human life with the higher mind, it's got a lot of work to do to break the reactionary nature of thousands and thousands of lives. But just as with anything, the more there is practice and the more there is swadhyay, or sometimes people say that I've heard this before, so how will it help? But the more the mind is reminded of things, the more it becomes second nature. Just like you got a basketball player or a cricket player or a football player, they play a game once, but they still play 100, 1,000 more times because until it becomes second nature to them, they may not have truly imbibed that thing. And I think that's one way, anyway, to help the mind stop wandering. But for each person, dependent on their past reactions and actions and past karmas, the way to for them to help control their mind might be different. For some, it might be Gnan Marg. For others, it might be Bhakti Marg. For others, it might be Kriya Marg or Seva. So it can be different for different people. Um, but these are some of the ways. Does that answer the question? Yeah, good.
So Mukul, I've also got one from Shushila. In terms of severe illnesses, how can one use this philosophy?
Yeah, absolutely. So many people, and I've had this with severe illnesses, whenever there's an extreme situation, it always makes one reflect, and it can either take one to really dive deep and really sort of overcome situations, take a philosophical approach and a very spiritual approach. And on the other extreme, sometimes these kind of situations can cause one to go into what we call artha dhyan and rodha dhyan, which is worry leading to hatred, leading to sort of negative emotions. And I guess it's more difficult in times of extreme illness because the body is going through so much pain to be able to focus in on these kind of things. But more than anything, these are the things that will help in those times, because these are the things that will help the mind become stronger than what the body is feeling. If we take the example of Mahavir Bhagwan, um, if you read the story of Mahavir Bhagwan and the 12 and a half years of sadhana, 12 and a half years was basically that was torture that was inflicted upon him, and his mind was stronger than his body at that time. And remember, in Jainism, Bhagwan is not some faraway entity that's never been like us. But in the Namuthunam Sutra, we say, Ai Gananam, or was once like us. And every Bhagwan, every Tirthankar, every Sadhu Maharaj, every Namo Loye Savasaharam, every Namo Rihantanam has has been like us and has overcome situations, overcome things, made the mind really strong. And I think coming back to the question, um, illness often means there's a break from a routine of many other things, and it causes one to really think about stuff that they may never have thought about before. So it might one might stop work, one might have more time in the day for certain things, and at that time, if one has someone who can explain these things or pravachans or meanings and can really listen to these things and reflect these things, then it can be very helpful. And, I mean, the whole thing started, uh, Jayesh Pai, and the whole sort of service for the whole Jain at the time of death. The whole thing that started about people visiting people in hospital, and in those last moments, which often can be painful moments, trying to help with samadhi maran. That's with a realization that these are more difficult moments. But if the mind can be stilled and concentrated in that time, then that can be one of the most useful and powerful times in terms of one's soul journey. Um, so I hope that kind of answers that question. Mm, hopefully.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so I don't know how long there's one more story, or we can do if we do one more story, we probably only have time for maybe a couple more questions. I don't know how the time works, Mira, or I can do more questions depending on if how many more questions there are. In terms of the stillness behind the permanence, um, that stillness is so um that stillness is the soul. And most of us um, identify with the body rather than the soul. We say Mara hat, Mara unak, Mara kan, Maru nam. Maro bhai, Mara paisa, Mari patni, Mari dikri, Maro parivar. But really, ape Atma ne jo hai, then the Atma doesn't own any of these things. But even our language shows that because of Maya and Mithyatva of many, many lifetimes, we identify with whichever body we happen to be inhabiting at that point in time, rather than with our soul. And that is known as one of the biggest fallacies that keeps the soul locked in the matrix of life, death, and rebirth. And applying discriminative mind or Vivek Buddhi to separate Hunje Chu from Hunje Nati is one of the essences of philosophy and dharma. And while you'll find that mentioned in its purest sense in Jain Dharma, you will find that alluded to in all faiths. Whether that's Buddhism, Hinduism, they'll all have a form of this, but the depth and the comprehension you'll get of this in the Jain tradition, if you go deep into the different scripts and textures, um, is unmatched. But all philosophies aim to try and get you on this kind of direction. Should I do the last story if there's no more questions? Mira,
Yeah,
if
yeah, you
maybe,
can carry on with the next story.
yeah, okay. Did everyone see my slide?
No.
No? Okay, let me do the share thing. One sec. Now?
Yes.
There was a family, mom, dad, and two brothers. The mom and dad were the happiest mom and dad. Perfect two sons, intelligent, respectful, excelled in everything that they did. Over time, the two kids grew up. One was 14, one was 16. One day, the father had gone far away for work, and the mother also wasn't at home. The mother was a devotee of Mahavir Bhagwan, and she often listened and heard about different aspects of Jain philosophy, including, recently, anitya, or the impermanence of many things that we relate to in this life. Mom and dad weren't at home, and on that day, um, their teacher from school hadn't arrived, so all the village kids played in the forest. They got hot, and they decided to go swimming in a nearby river. They went. It was quite a deep lake, and the younger brother got caught in a current, and he said, Moto bhai, mane bachao." And the older brother heard this and went to help him. But the younger brother, 14-year-old, was so scared that instead he held on to his older brother. But instead of the older brother saving the older brother was pulled down by the younger brother, and both got caught in the current. And both the brothers passed away. The friends managed to rescue their bodies. Nobody was at home. The friends weren't sure what to do. They covered the bodies and left them. After some hours, the mother arrived home, and she saw the two bodies of her two sons 114 and 116. Can you imagine the shock that she went through? These kind of things can drive people um, to depression, to psychosis, to all sorts of issues. When such a big shock hits, it can cause people to have heart attacks. It can cause so many things. This kind of a shock. How can she control herself in this moment? She cried. Then she composed herself and she said, "Look, I've understood the philosophy and I might be able to survive this shock. But my husband has never had time to listen to or understand any of these things. And he's really attached to our sons, as I am. But if he hears this, then the shock might kill him. What can I do? It'll be a few hours till he comes." She thought of something to do. So the husband gets home, and at that time, the bodies of the two sons are in a different room. At that time, she starts crying. The husband says, "Why are you crying?" She said, "Don't worry, you won't understand." Can you imagine what she's doing at this time to prevent, in front? It's easy to talk about this, but with the event that's just happened. He says, "No, no, tell me, why are you crying?" She said, "I'm really upset at our neighbors." He said, "Why? What happened?" He goes, "Well, about 15 days ago, we went to that wedding. I borrowed two jewels from our neighbors, two earrings, lovely earrings. And now, after 15 days, I didn't return them because I liked them so much. And now they've come to ask for them back." And I said, "No, no, no. I really love these two earrings, these two jewels, and I won't return them to you." And I had a fight with our neighbor because of that. And then the husband said, "Are you silly? It's their earrings, and they lent it to you, made you happy, and now you won't return them?" And she said, "It's easy for you to say." And he goes, "What's happened to you? You never cry, you're never upset, you're so balanced. What are you doing now?" "I'm going to take these jewels and return them myself." She said, "No, no, 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 you can't do that." She kept drumming this in, and she kept making him say that you're silly. If someone's lent you these jewels and you've had them for 15 days, now if they're asking for them back, then you can't behave like this. You have to return them. Finally, after he kept saying this multiple times, she said, "Okay, fine. I'll return the jewels. Come with me." And finally, she takes him to the room where their two sons are, lifts the covers, and says, "Here are the two jewels." And they've had to go back. The husband is shocked. He still sort of falls unconscious, but then he wakes up. And the shock that he suffers is less. And she uses that to explain to him that, "Look, nature gave us these two beautiful sons. We had time with them for 15 years. Now, nature's asked for them back. And no matter what we may ask for, what we may try, we have no choice. We have to give them back. And if we become so upset at this time that we can't function at all, then we are as silly as you told me at that time. Now, don't cry, just like you told me. And let's not take any rash action. And for the sake of our two jewels, let's dedicate this life, the remainder of this life, to them." And they both took Diksha, became a monk and a nun, sadhu and sadhvi, and the rest of their life they spent it in good deeds and making use of the remainder of their human life, which, without an understanding of this kind of a philosophy, they could have both easily gone into depression and a suicidal even nature of mind, because when a big shock occurs in life, whether of a positive or a negative nature, and the mind is not strong, then any reaction can occur unless one, at that moment, in that time, whether that's shock, whether that's a moment of anger or greed or ego or rag or dvesh or being upset at something. And it's in those times that all these moments of swadhyaya and listening to pravachans and listening to things, it's in those moments that when some of this seeps into subconscious mind, and in that critical moment, it can be the difference between a drastic negative action and an action that saves your own or someone else's life or morality at that moment in time. So that's the story of the two jewels. Stop that share. Um, Fine. So I think 9:05 Taiga. Um, is there time for any more questions, Mira?
Yeah, we've got time for questions.
Yeah.
I do have one from Hasmukbhai.
Yeah.
He's saying awareness of impermanence does not always hit the mind. How does one address attachments and emotional history, learning how to let go and actually being able to let go?
Um, sow a sow a thought, you reap a habit. Sow a habit, you reap a character. Sow a character, you reap a destiny. Whichever of our thoughts are acted on the most become our habits, and our habits become our character, and our character determines our future. So whenever an occasion occurs where through the understanding of philosophy, we have the option to react or reflect. And each time we choose the option of reflecting, we strengthen that pathway in our brain of reflection. Each time we choose to react with extreme emotions, we strengthen that pathway of reacting. Those pathways that we strengthen are not just on our mind and our brain, but also on our soul, which follow us into future lifetimes. And whichever those pathways we have strengthened the most um, becomes our nature. And so it's difficult because all of us have come to this world through, as I say, through probably very few of our lives have been, less of our lives have been in the human realm, and more have probably been in Ekindia, Baindia, Taindia, Chorindia, Panchindia, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sense. So we're much more used to perhaps reacting, but we do have a higher mind in this life that can reflect. And the more we strengthen that pathway, the more easy it will be to take that pathway. Does that make sense? કે અંગ્રેજી બહુ છે કે ગુજરાતી વધારે કરવાનું કે probably એન્ડમાં પૂછું છું હવે બિગિનિંગમાં પૂછવાની જરૂર હતી but is it the right balance and that was in English I must explain that is that okay કે ગુજરાતીમાં એ થોડુંક
I think English
is
is
better
fine because
fine good
this is meant to be a Jainism class in English, so
fine
that's all
so that's fine
fine.
then yeah
Vipul has just a message just to say very interesting talk and to thank you for the lesson as well.
thanks I'm learning through doing this talk just for me it's Swadhyay as well so
So does anyone have any more questions? You can put your hand up or you can message me, message Govit or Darshna or Mukul directly. I haven't received any other questions. Kavit or Darshna, any of you guys? received anything?
I haven't received
No.
anything either.
Yes.
Saritha's just mentioned very interesting, but needs a lot of practice to strengthen your mind.
Is this concept, just out of interest for me, is this something most people have heard of before, or is it a new concept, or?
I mean, we did have a lesson by Mehlbhai Sangrajka on karma, but also on your mind and your thoughts, and how to not how to control them, but I guess in a way how to control them actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of concepts kind of overlap in quite a few areas as well.
I think we just have some messages of thanks, Mukul, to yourself, from our students. Very interesting talk and simple method of learning is good. And thank you, Mukul, for the interesting lecture. They're the comments that I've received. I think it's probably a good place to stop. I know you've had a long shift as well, so
Yeah.
I'm sure you're ready to go home. So I think we can end there, and just like to say thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to impart your knowledge on the subject to us. And I'm sure a lot of people will take the stories that you've told and take it all on, try and take it all on board anyway, and hopefully review the way they think and incorporate it in their daily lives. So thank you.
Thank you, Mira. Kavit, Darshana. Thank you, everyone.
Great. So we'll end the lesson here, and it'll be another guest speaker next week. So Shandip Pai will send out a message on the WhatsApp group just to say who the lecture will be from. But thank you, Mukulbhai, and I think we'll end the session there. See you next week, everyone.
मंगला